first story. My story is not particularly dramatic, but it is true. I live on the third floor of a large house that has been renovated into apartment buildings. The area is urban and relatively affluent, with spacious houses that are very close to one another. Our living room window faces the window of our next-door neighbor. I always assumed it was the attic. There seems to be some junk stacked about, and prior to this incident I had never seen movement or light over there. I know it would suit the story to say it was run down or otherwise creepy, but the house is actually quite nice, if somewhat nondescript. I have a newborn daughter, and she's prone to waking at regular intervals in the night to nurse. Being considerate, I take her out of our bedroom to avoid waking my husband and nurse her on the futon. It was the middle of the night, and we were nursing as usual, when to my surprise a light came on in the neighbor's window. Moments later, a man walked past the window, happened to glance up, and paused. So we're staring at one another in these opposing windows, and I'm feeling a bit sheepish, so I smile awkwardly. The guy just keeps staring at me with a blank expression on his face. And then, suddenly, he takes off his shirt. Wait, is he? No, nothing untoward is happening, his hands are in sight. Being very exhausted, I'm not sure how to handle this surreal, but not quite terrifying situation. The guy doesn't look dangerous or even interesting, white, thin, middle-aged and wearing pajama pants. A minute or so passes, and I finally just give him a little wave. He abruptly turns and walks out of sight, followed by the light goes off. The following night, my daughter wakes up at roughly the same time. We settle into the lactation station. She's nursing contentedly. I haven't given him much thought, so my heart sinks when I look up, and notice our neighbor in the window again shirtless, staring at me with the same blank expression. Now I'm a bit pissed, but I don't want to disturb the baby. Here's the creepy part, and it's difficult to write without my hair standing on end. This guy slowly leans forward, placing his hands on the glass, and smiles the most leering, menacing, toothy smile I've ever seen. His eyes were wide and straining, and it seemed his cheeks would crack with exertion. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, he starts laughing at me. I mean laughing, cackling hysterically, with his hands still against the glass and that deranged look on his face. I jumped up and ran into the bedroom, where I nursed the baby in bed with my husband and tried to figure out what the hell just happened. It sounds simple, but it's one of the scariest things that ever happened to me. Especially considering he knows where I live. Second story. This is a true story, believe me, or not. My grandfather was about 50 years old when he died. Personally, I never met or spoke to him before. He had died before I was born, not really sure thought. I heard this story from my older cousin. He has met my grandpa and grew up around him. He had told me that my grandfather was a great man, always a friendly person. My grandpa was a businessman, he spoke many languages and traveled a lot. Our family is from Vietnam, but because of my grandpa, he would go to the cities very often. Every time he was gone, he would be gone for days, even weeks. Well, one day he had come home and was walking past this little bridge, kind of like a couple of feet. He was walking past it when he saw a young girl. He had said to her, "You shouldn't be out here so early. It's dangerous." She had nodded her head and promised she would go home. The next day he had went out of business and came home really late. He saw her again jump roping all by her. He came up to her and said, "It's late, honey, go home." "Didn't I tell you this already?" He went inside and my grandma woke up and asked why he came home so late. He explained himself and said to my grandma, "Honey, you know that neighborhood girl is such a bad kid. The other day I saw her outside early in the morning sitting by the bridge, and tonight when I was coming inside she was jump roping in the middle of the night. We should really talk to her parents." My grandmother looked at him in shock. The calmly she had said to him, "Honey, when you gone for the week on your business trip in the city, that little girl next door died. That's why I went to the funeral today when you were at work." My grandpa could not believe what he had heard. If she died, who in the world was he talking to the last couple of days then? The next day my grandpa got really sick with a fever and could not leave his bed. But from what my cousin had said, when you see a ghost and speak to them and then realize what you had seen, you will become very ill later. That's one of the bad things ghosts give you when you see them. Third story. The following is not my only experience, but it is one of my most frightening. To be honest, I'm not even sure if this should be classified as a psychic experience. I'd appreciate some feedback on this. I was about 17 at the time, young enough to be impressionable, but old enough not to let my imagination run away with me. Although, the events that followed to me, believing that I wasn't imagining anything. It was summer 2003 and I was at home alone. My parents were at work. It was really humid that night and I was lying on the couch, watching TV. Some time passed and gradually the humidity didn't seem so bad. Then I actually felt quite comfortable. A few minutes after that, I have to admit I was downright cold. So I pulled myself into a sitting position on the couch, just as my program came to an end. At that moment of silence, between my program ending and the next commercial, I could have swore I heard a sound on the stairs, going to the basement. My family's home had a pretty traditional layout. When you came in the entrance, you were at the stairway with the option of going down to the basement, or up to the kitchen. You then had to walk the full length of the kitchen, then go to your left to enter the living room, where I was at the time, seated on the couch, which was the length of the wall that joined the kitchen and living room. So I was positioned in such a way that a person would actually have to walk into the living room, in order for me to see them. So, needless to say at the time, I heard the sound. I switched off the television and listened more carefully. A few moments passed, I heard nothing, but now the room wasn't just cold, it was freezing. I hear another sound, but now it's in the kitchen. I'm straining my ears over the sound, but because of my pounding heart I can't hear something else. At this point, I notice even more unusual. The air is getting tight now to see. This is the part that I don't know how to explain properly. It felt like there was a build-up of energy, almost like that moment before, an overstretched rubber band snaps, or a balloon pops. By this time, my heart is galloping in my chest. I'm trying to bolt for the living room door. Only thing is, if I go to the door, I'm able to see almost half the kitchen, and at this point I'm not sure I can to see if there's anything in there. A few moments passed. It felt like hours and I was frozen with indecision. Then, I hear a very loud distinct thunk come from the kitchen and I bolted for the door. I didn't look back and wanted to get outside. When I got to the end of the driveway, the normal humidity finally hit me and I thought I would smother to death. I stood there not quite certain what to do with myself. I decided I'd walk downtown and visit a friend who was working at the corner store and just kill some time until I knew my mother would be home. So I headed down the street and crossed the road to the left sidewalk when I noticed my neighbor sitting on her steps. I offered her a friendly hello, but nothing more. She was a very religious woman who kept to herself, and to be honest, I never got the impression that she liked me much. She got up, went to her door and asked, "Where are you headed?" I said, "Downtown, to see Vanessa." She nodded and stayed quiet a few moments. Then I stood there uncomfortably, until she finally opened her door and said, "No, better come inside. The kids have a movie, you're welcome to come watch." She ushered me inside, where I stayed until my parents got home. All the while she sat on her step just waiting. The thing about all of this is, it's a weird incident immediately followed by another weird incident. This woman was not friendly and hadn't invited me into her home since I was 10 years old. I'd considered that perhaps she saw that I was frightened and wanted to help me, but the thing is I had calmed myself by that point and it was dark. How could she know I was scared? As I said, this was not my only experience with this type of thing, but I would really appreciate all of your opinions on it.